Welcome to Evolve to Succeed, the podcast that brings together business owners, leaders and experts to talk about their business journeys and provide them with invaluable insights and explore the link between personal and business success. I am your host, Warren Munson, founder of Evolve. I have previously founded, grown and successfully exited 3 businesses in the business services and technology sectors. I have a passion for helping and advising businesses and seeing them succeed. We all know that leading and running a business comes with its own unique joys and challenges, and Evolve provides the advice, guidance and support to the business, you and your teams on that journey, be that if you're starting, growing or looking to exit or step away from your business. We do this through our Ignite, Thrive and Optimise programs and services, which include strategic advice, coaching and mentoring, leadership training, funded business support and so much more. If you want to learn more about Evolve, then please do go to evolveadvisory.co.uk or connect and message me on LinkedIn. For now though, let's just get on with the show. Among the clients and businesses we work with, as well as the support programs we deliver for local authorities and enterprises, a topic that always is at the top of their list is employee engagement. I think most business owners would agree that keeping your team engaged is fundamental to success. And from my own experience of running Inspire, once we got employee engagement right, the business really started to fly. So in this episode, I sit down with both Evolve's delivery lead and advisor David Mutton and Matthew Fretten, managing partner at Frettens Solicitors, which has won awards and recognition for employee engagement. Amongst the other things up for discussion is defining what engagement actually is and how to maintain it during periods of growth. We also look at the 4 pillars of employee engagement and hear what Matthew and Frettens have done to reach such high levels of employee engagement. My hope from this episode is that you'll gain some food for thought on what you can do to really boost employee engagement and motivation, and therefore enable your team to shine even brighter. And remember, the team here at Evolve are here to help. Enjoy the episode. Welcome, David. Great as my colleague to have you on the Evolve to Succeed podcast once again. This time we're talking about employee engagement, aren't we?
We are. Yeah, great to be here, Warren, and to talk about such an important topic and one that's, really important to us.
Yeah, and it is one. It's fair to say that, with the clients and the businesses we work with, and also as part of the business support programs that we deliver for the local authorities, the LEPs, it's always one of those topics top of the list that people want included, isn't it?
It is. It's so important, and you people are absolutely fundamental to any business, whatever's going on in the world with artificial intelligence and whatnot. Fundamentally, people, leadership, and so on just remain critical to the overall success.
Yeah, we'll touch, I'm sure, a bit on my journey, my pieces. Yeah, it wasn't until we really got the people right, issues right, the engagement in the team right, that we started to fly as a business when we were Inspire.
Okay. When
we didn't have those aspects really singing, it was quite clunky. It was like pushing water uphill. But actually, once we got that right, the business started to fly. And the other aspects, I think, we often forget as business owners, business leaders, we tend to put our customers at the forefront of everything we do. But there's some great quotes, I think, by Richard Branson, Simon Sinek, that actually say you can't do that. It's about, you've got to put your team first, your employees first, and you look after them, and then they look after your clients. And I think that's my experience. I don't know about yours.
I think I'd 100% agree. I think it's very easy to not think like that.
Yeah.
However, I think, you can appreciate both people need to be treated equally, right? Because, trust, loyalty, honesty, these are all kind of characteristics that, are so important. And like, say Simon Sinek, as you quoted, just really treat them fairly, kindly, and work with people.
Yeah. I mean, the Simon Sinek quote is very succinct, and it simply says, customers will never love your company until the employees love it first.
It's a great quote, isn't it?
It is. It's so simple, isn't it? But it probably sums up, that kind of topic of what is employee engagement, really.
It really does. And I think, engagement is it's something that's quite hard to define, isn't it? But it's ultimately that person's energy is going towards the overall success of the business, you know. And you do see statistics about how businesses lose out because their employees are not engaged on a particular task. And, you know, just perhaps the economic benefits is just one of the reasons why, you know, that employee engagement is so important. But I think, you know, Warren, from your perspective, have you know, when things were going well and have gone well, what other benefits have you really seen in that kind of employee engagement piece?
Yeah, I think what we've really seen is the things I saw was that piece around nearly ownership, I think was probably top of my list, is that it felt like they were really thinking about the business and they were thinking about what was right for the business, for our clients, for their fellow team members. They were really bought into our kind of journey, what good looked like for us as a business. And it felt like there was this self-generated momentum. And as a result of that, you know, we were able to, you know, deliver client delight, which won us some national awards. We were innovative in what we did. We definitely felt like we were more productive, and it did help us attract new talent because ultimately the local business economy knew what we were doing. They could see and hear what we were doing because there was this kind of drumbeat of people being evangelical that worked for Inspire out there in the kind of community, and that did definitely help attract talent as well. So I think the benefits were definitely multifaceted.
Fantastic. And I think yeah, it's just enjoyable, I guess, isn't it?
Definitely.
You know, it's enjoyable. And yeah, have you kind of put your finger on like why that was, you know, how you managed to achieve that, and, you know, what you were doing at that given time that really benefited?
Yeah, I think, and I probably should give some credit to, you know, an individual, you know, Steve Jones, that helped us with this, you know, back in, if people that know the story, you know, business started in 2004, went on a kind of dramatic growth path, getting a lot of things right, particularly when we had a small team. That team were really engaged because that closeness, and I think this is the story with a lot of businesses and startups. If you relate it to the startup story, many businesses in that startup phase, you've got a small team, you're all in it together. Engagement typically isn't an issue because everybody knows what's happening, why it's happening. Lots of the things we'll talk about later, I'm sure, about what creates good engagement. It's just happening naturally. And that was our story. But then we went through this growth period and we didn't then put the right structure in place. We didn't think about the things we should be doing to continue that momentum. And come 2014, 10 years into the journey, it felt like we weren't the business that we set out to create and I wanted to achieve. That was when we did actually have some dialogue. We engaged with Steve Jones, who, you know, helped us and understand some of the aspects that we needed to focus on to drive good employee engagement and make it sustainable. And a lot of that comes from actually some research that was done around 2009, 2011.
It's McLeod, isn't it?
It is. It's the McLeod research that was done that effectively says there are 4 enablers, 4 pillars, whatever you want to call them, of employee engagement. And, you know, it's fundamentally where we start when we sit down with a business or a group of business leaders and talk to them about engagement, isn't it? They're the 4 areas they need to focus on. And that's what we did. So perhaps, David, we should just give our listeners a little bit insight into what those 4 areas are.
Yeah, absolutely, Warren. And I think, you know, first of all, that leadership is crucial, isn't it? Visible, empowering leadership is the way it's described. And ultimately, there's a why. You know, there's a reason the organisation is doing what it's doing. It knows where it's come from and it knows where it wants to go. And, you know, ultimately, if your job can be described in a much simpler fashion, maybe you do X within the business. You know, if that's all that you can think about, then sometimes that might not always be the most motivational aspect. And if that business isn't necessarily presenting a story, we are human beings, we love stories, we love watching films, we love reading books, to understand what that business is trying to achieve. Okay. And if employees understand that, then that's only going to be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. We put, the other ones are around, giving your employees a voice, aren't they? And giving them, and I think we should, and we will delve into these a bit more detail, about having integrity,
Absolutely. And again, just some of the other pillars there, we've got integrity. Do you live and breathe it? Do you say and do what you say you will do? Do your managers have the skills to treat people as individuals, to spend time with them, to listen to people, which is the fourth one there, the employee voice. You just mentioned. You kind of, it's important to listen. Yeah. It's important to understand. It's important to make decisions. It's important to, manage, empower, and kind of really work with people to kind of say, look, we're all gunning towards a certain, outcome here.
Definitely, yeah. So just listeners, as a reminder, the 4 pillars are visible, empowering leadership, giving the employees a voice is number 2. Number 3 is engaging managers. And number 4 is organisational integrity. Let's perhaps talk about, I think, one of those that, most of our businesses that we work with, I've got to say 95, if not 98, 99% are owner-managed, they're owner-led businesses. And the first part of that is that visible, empowering leadership is where I think those businesses can set themselves up apart from their competition, because they will all have this story.
They will. And I guess, Warren, when you were leading Inspire, that was something that you were very much doing?
Yeah, definitely. It was actually something that we introduced. Was actually, we had a really strong backstory. We had really strong purpose as to why I created the business, and actually that was one of the things we'd lost along the way. So actually what we started to do was actually ensure that I spent time with the new team members as they joined. Something I learned off Mark Cribb at the Urban Group. He every now and again would get everybody in and do a presentation about the story. Anybody that knew that joined to come in, and that's what we started to do. So collectively we'd say any new joiners in the last 2 months, there's a session, and I told the story, and it came from me, and it came from the heart. And actually, they got to learn what the business was about. What that kind of initial focus, passion, and belief for the business was, and the story, the journey we'd been on, and where we were and where we were going, and that installed some of that original, I'm going to say passion again, but original belief in everybody in the business about where we're on. And what it also did was really reaffirming to those that had been around a long time that we still cared about where we'd come from, the journey that they had helped participate in. And I think that really did help.
I guess when the business is owner managed, you really need to use that to your advantage to an extent, to kind of give you a commercial advantage in the story.
Yeah. And we talk about, with 2024, aren't we now? And it's still going to be hard in the start of 2024 and through 2024, I'm sure, to attract talent. But one of the things an owner-managed SME business can do is, if they can tell their story and share it, people buy into that, don't they? People buy into the emotion of that, and that will help attract talent. And perhaps choose that they'll come and work for you rather than work for a larger corporate. But you've also got to have some piece around that. The story's one thing, but you've also got to be able to share, not just with new starters, with the business as a whole, is the vision for the business. And
you do. And I was just going to say to you, like, when you kind of talking to business here and you're saying, look, it's all very easy saying, look, create a story, but how do you go about that, Warren? What really are the building blocks of doing that and kind of getting people to buy into that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's about just, as the owner or owners of the business, just sitting down with a blank piece of paper and just brainstorm. It's a really cathartic exercise, actually. Think about, from that day one, why did you want to start the business? what was the purpose, what's the passion, as I call it, focus, passion and belief, and think about all of the milestones that have happened along the way. Now, be careful. It's sometimes easy when you're trying to convey that to tell just all the good stuff. It was really important in our story for me to admit where I'd got it wrong. I suppose that comes into probably the integrity pillar. But, think about all the things that have happened in the business, and then you string them together. And then it's quite easy, isn't it? If you own a business, regardless of your personality type, you're going to be passionate and you're going to show emotion when you tell that story, and that's what people want to hear. But really, I think just do the exercise, blank piece of paper, start with what was the purpose, what was the focus, passion and belief, and start to jot down the milestones, and then use those bullet points, sit in front of somebody, and that's what I did, and just tell the story. Tell it from the heart. And
would you expect your customers to understand that story as well?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because I think there is around kind of the story, around vision, I think there is a huge benefit in sharing that with not just your team internally, but the external environment. And we did that to a degree. We held some conferences, and I remember standing on stage feeling very exposed in 2016, 17, and telling the Inspire story, warts and all. But again, we stood there in front of the business community, our clients, customers in the room, the intermediaries, those that provided us work. And we're honest, and we shared our story, and people loved it, and people really engaged with it. Because there's so much in we have this conversation quite frequently, David, particularly maybe in the world in which we operate. There's a lot of kind of rah-rah out there. There's a lot of pumping the chest, isn't there? There's a lot of social media posts about, people being successful. But people, in my opinion, don't tell the honest story often enough. And if people told the honest story more often, I think more businesses would be successful, and more business owners wouldn't find themselves perhaps in that slightly lonely place.
Agree. Yeah.
But, we'll change the world one step at a time, David. But so as well as the story, I think it's really important if you're talking about that visible and empowering leadership, to make sure that you've got a story and a vision, where you've been, where you are and where you're going, and that you share and communicate that. And I think from that perspective, and making sure, I suppose visible and empowering leadership to me also is about showing up as the business owner, business leaders, showing up, being present, and we'll talk about some of the aspects of behaviours that I think a leader needs to portray to get great engagement. But being visible, being accessible is really important in terms of that pillar, in my opinion. So, our second pillar that we start to talk about could be, engaging managers.
Completely. And I think so often that the person that's technically best at a given job is then said, well, you're the manager. Yeah. And actually, there is a conversation about whether managers and leaders are born or whether they're developed, and that will go on for time. And I think that clearly some of the key questions really are, how do you how does your managers, drive culture, performance? How do we coach individuals? And I think that there's a growing group of evidence around coaching people to be able to do a job. It's very easy to bring someone in, give them an induction, say, you're now my manager, now go and manage people. Okay? And unfortunately, in most cases, it doesn't quite work that way. We have to coach our managers to be leaders, to be managers. We need to help them understand, the wins and the challenges, and build that into them. That's what I think.
Definitely. I think that you're right that there is that. Is it the Peter principle? People just get promoted to the point of incompetence because they become managers and then senior managers. But actually, particularly again in a small business where perhaps we're developing the team, we want to grow our own. That's quite usually a great way of actually getting engagement, because people really believe and they're growing with you. But you can't. You're absolutely right. You just can't put them into that place without giving them some support, some mentoring, some coaching, and some training.
And ongoing support as well.
Yeah.
You know, when does any of us ever stop improving as a manager, as a leader?
Yeah.
You know, different circumstances. Yes, of course, as we get more experience, we're going to be able to deal with more things. But fundamentally, we've got to have those people that engage our team. Yeah, and that is the way they look them in the eye. That's the way they care. That's the way they're honest. That's the way that they inspire.
Yeah, and this is an aside, but I think it was we talked earlier about the kind of inspire piece and how did I know what were the benefits, or what did I see happen when we had good engagement. We installed this culture that we wanted everybody to have a growth mindset, you know, everybody to be better at the end of the year doing what they did than they were at the start of the year. So it wasn't about everybody wanting to be promoted. It was just like, if you're happy doing your role, that's great, but all we need you to be is better at doing that, and then develop yourself during the course of a year so you're better at the end than you were at the start. And interestingly, we started that with that as a kind of principle, you know, as a kind of objective. When we had engagement right, that's what we saw, was everybody was switched on to actually, I'm going to be better at what I do.
The mindset of growth and the kind of I am going to grow, and you know that is such an important aspect, isn't it?
And I love it when we do these sessions with groups and you talk about the principle of not yet.
The power of yet. Carol Dweck, Dr. Carol Dweck, and you see it in primary schools now, don't you? Where they say when a child says, "I can't do that," and then the teacher just goes, "Yet." And it's a lovely mentality. Definitely.
That's slightly aside, but it does fit with the kind of engagement piece. And I think that piece around managers and having engagement managers is really important, because the statistics say, don't they? It's another quote, but nearly every survey you see effectively ends up summarising with people don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I can relate to that. In my early career, when I moved on, it wasn't necessarily because I didn't believe in the company I was working for. The line management just was wrong.
Yeah, and I think, you know, great leaders can exist within organisations where the culture doesn't help the leader. You know, it's got to be both. It's got to be the organisation and it's got to be the people. You know, so I think that's really important as well to consider.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I was going to say, Warren, in terms of kind of the next pillar, employee voice, I know this is something that you've really considered over time, you know, in terms of how you go about listening to your employees. What would you have to say on that?
I think the first thing is that when you're very entrepreneurial, okay, and when you're very driven, it can be one of the most difficult pillars, I think, because you start the business, you've got this real thing, and this piece around allowing constructive challenge is where I think it starts from, okay? And typically, if you're an owner manager and you're driven, that's not naturally in your personality set. I think it's a fair comment.
Yeah.
So the first thing is to allow yourself, and I think it's a growth piece in you as a leader, to go, actually, I'm not just going to passively listen. I'm going to actively listen to what my team are saying, and I'm going to take constructive challenge. And I think there is a mindset shift here. Yeah, particularly again if you're moving from startup to that scale up growth phase. I think scale up, again, you're all in it together. There's enough listening going on. When you start to scale, you really have got to, you know, people come on board. You don't necessarily get to know them in the same way, but they have an opinion, they have a voice, and they need to be heard. So you've got to change your mindset to be open to that. And actually create the environments. That's what we did. We created the environments to listen. You know, you can do employee surveys. And one of the things that worries me a lot of the time is people do an employee survey and think, I've done a survey. That's not enough, is it? You've got to then listen to the feedback, you know, and actually respond to it. And that was one of the first things we did. Was we did a survey. We had some really honest feedback, some really lovely positive stuff, some suggestions to things we could do better as a leadership team, as a management team. But one of the breakthrough moments was we went back and we presented back to the whole team. Great, thank you. These are the results of the survey. This is what you've said. These are the things that you suggest we could do better. Here's all of the stuff that you've suggested that we're going to do now. There's some really quick wins. Funny enough, there was stuff that they suggested that we already offered or did, but we just hadn't communicated it well enough, which is a bit of a wake-up call. So here's the things we can do today, and this is what we're going to do. Here are the things that we would like to do, but we just can't do them yet. They're great ideas. They're now on the roadmap. You can hold us accountable to them. And we did give them some of the things we kind of give, but that could happen within the year. That can, we can just start to do some stuff. And then we had at the bottom, these are the things we're not going to do. We understand the suggestion, and we explained why. And I think that was as I've explained it, a breakthrough moment.
And how did staff take those no's that, we definitely aren't going to do that?
Because we'd listened, because if we'd have just ignored them, that would have been really negative. But we didn't just ignore them. We said, look, we can understand it, and perhaps maybe we need to understand a bit more about why the suggestion's been made. But these are our reasons why we can't.
Are you able to talk about what those were, or an example of one of those kind of reds where some people were asking, but you were like, no?
Really, yeah, it's a good question. I think some of it was around, it wasn't all this employee survey was about, but some of it was about benefits, remuneration, those kind of things. And it sounds really archaic now, but some of it was about, can we do a 4-day week? Can we, that was definitely one of them. And at the time was probably old school, and it wasn't something that we didn't see how we could serve our clients, where we have to serve our clients on a 5-day-a-week basis with staff doing 4 days a week. Now that was way before COVID, and COVID's come now, and we've all got a different opinion. But that was a good example of one. But the explanation was, look, we serve our clients 5 days. Everybody has a client portfolio. There's an expectation that everybody can respond promptly, as and when our client needs. So that's a good example.
Okay.
I think that was kind of a breakthrough moment. And then the other thing we did, which is something I always recommend business owners, leaders do, is we set up either breakfast or lunchtime sessions where we wouldn't have the whole team in, because sometimes if you get a whole team in, nobody wants to put their hand up, nobody wants to ask questions. So we broke the team into groups of 10, and I would just sit there with a cup of coffee with them, maybe some breakfast, maybe some lunch, with no agenda. And it's just like, okay, I'm here. What do you want to know? And what do I need to know? And just have that open dialogue. Again, it's really important you start to do that in that growth phase. Startup phase, it's happening naturally. And again, some of this stuff, this is why it becomes important to really address employee engagement early on in that scale-up growth phase. But they were some of the things we did around the listening culture. But, you just got to remember, golden rule number 1 is, change your mindset, accept constructive criticism, and ensure that you've got two-way communication going on. So I think we've probably covered, a few of the pillars there. We've got integrity to come back to, but perhaps we should take a break in our conversation and hear from Matthew Fretten, who's been award-winning in terms of Frettens Solicitors, in terms of their employee engagement and what they have to say. Welcome, Matthew, to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Really excited to have a conversation with you around employee engagement. It's something that we see that Frettens Solicitors does well, and as I'm sure we'll touch on during the course of the conversation, you've won awards as a firm for your employee engagement. So I suppose we should start in this conversation about, why is employee engagement so important to Frettens?
I think to place it in some context, I think employee engagement, if you ask any business leader, I suppose that would be something that they would tell you was incredibly important. I think a lot of businesses that I see are I think particularly where you might have a strong leader or even a charismatic leader or a very energetic leader. I'm not suggesting I'm any of those things, but there's often an assumption that your staff are following in your wake and they're as motivated and engaged and as sort of sharing this passion and vision as much as you are as the leader. A few years ago now, back in probably 2018, we as a business, we made a very conscious decision to grow our business. So we hit a turnover level of about £3 million. We struggled really hard to break through that limit, and our business was becoming quite predictable. But what was also happening was that we were losing some of our better staff, and it made us stop and look at the whole employee piece at that stage. Yeah. So it was very much linked with, well, we'd like to grow our business over the next few years, but we're a bit worried that we're perhaps not as good at employee engagement, and our staff perhaps are not as motivated and engaged as they could be, and what are we going to do about it? So that's sort of the start of our story, sort of in
just
recent
puts
years.
It into context. And it's quite interesting because, Dave and I often talk about the fact that, engagement is quite easy when you're a smaller business because there is usually that leader, that person leading the charge, the founder, and everybody follows. But as you grow, and again, I've often shared and have shared in the early part of this podcast, is that, that becomes more difficult as you start to grow. And actually, it's that point where actually you've got to put something in place, some framework in place around it, haven't you? Yeah,
absolutely. And for us, it was very much. I would I would get criticised from time to time by sort of senior members of my team saying, "Look, we know what's going on, and we know what the plan is, and we know where we're going, and all the rest of it. But actually, we're not sure the communication to everybody is as good as it should be." And so communication, and you think, well, okay, that's obvious, isn't it? Surely everyone knows that. But how do you actually do that? So one of the very first things we did, and you were very kind to mention it at the outset, but is we signed up for the Best Companies employee engagement survey. So this is the stuff you see in the Sunday Times and all the rest of it. And the Best Companies, it's an anonymous survey which we do twice a year now, but back in 2018 we do it once a year. And we got to the conclusion that we needed to take the temperature in terms of, well, just how engaged are our staff, and it breaks it down into different parts of the business. So it would be, are you happy with the leadership of the business? Are you happy with your manager? Do you feel rewarded? Do you feel that you're making a difference, contributing, all that stuff? And we got good results in 2018. We didn't have bad results, but it definitely threw up some areas that we could improve. And that was the start of, if you like, us formalising that employee engagement process. So, which led to lots and lots of practical decisions being made. And we shared all of the results with all of the staff. So that's quite scary, sort of telling them what we're not very good at. And equally, we then made decisions purely based on that anonymous survey. And the only person who wasn't allowed to fill it in was me. But we got a really good sort of return rate. So we had sort of 95% of people would do the survey. And, I banged on about it enough, so I really wanted them to do it. And we've done it every year since. But one of the things that came out, so without the employees engaged, how on earth were we going to achieve our growth plan? Now, I'm not saying that they weren't engaged, but in order to sort of meet some of our growth ambitions, we would need staff who are motivated, up for the challenge and all the rest of it. And very quickly, as you've sort of touched upon, we needed to formalise that process. It was no longer a matter of, Matt and the other partners are really excited about doing this, so we're going to jump on board. It's actually, well, what are the aims of the business? What's my role? How do I fit into all of that? And what are the responsibilities? So
you really did start with that visible kind of leadership and sharing the vision and the plan for the business.
Yeah. So I think we started in 2018. We had a relatively modest. Our ambition, I think, back in 2018 was to get from 3 million to 4 million. That was. Yeah. Don't ask me why. We didn't ask any accountant why or how that could happen, but we just sort of picked a number out of the air and said, look, come on, let's try and get this out. I think over the next 3 years, that was our aim. And we set out a strategy, and we set out how we thought we would achieve that growth. And we used to, like many businesses, I used to have an AGM each year, so we'd all go to a hotel one
that
afternoon.
Kind of state of the nation thing.
This is like, absolutely. And what actually happened was we booked the hotel for 4:00, so everyone would be delighted because they got out of work early. And then they'd all come and sit in silence as I spoke for 20 minutes about how well we'd done and what our plans were for the coming year. Bear in mind, this was once a year we used to do this. And then at 5:15 or whatever, you said, come on, everyone have a drink in the bar. And everyone would scurry off home early because they'd think, oh, great, I get to go home early. And they were clearly disengaged with that.
It's a sign of disengagement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that obviously wasn't working. So one of the first things we did when we formulated our strategy was we decided that we would do away with our AGMs. And a practical thing we did was that myself and Lewis, who's our marketing commercial director, we would take a cross-section of the firm, probably about 10 or 12 people, and every couple of months we would take a group in a small room and we would go through the strategy line by line almost. We'd tell them exactly what, we'd have a bit of an update on how we're doing, but we'd then go, right, okay, over the next 2-3 years, this is what we want to achieve. This is how we think we're going to do it. These are the areas we want to grow. And this is your role in it. And as staff, we'd love you to do more of this and less of that and more of this, and give them a very clear idea of where we wanted to take the business. So once that sort of permeated throughout the staff, no one could say that they weren't up to speed with, well, what direction are we going at? We then kind of reinforce that. And these are really practical measures, but again, we'd have an appraisal system where you might meet with your line manager once or twice a year and talk about your salary.
Again, the old-fashioned, traditional
very
approach.
traditional. So what I decided was that as managing partner, I would meet every single lawyer, fee earner in our business every 2 months. And we'd go through their figures. So it should be a relatively short meeting, 5 or 10 minutes. They never are, but that's the plan. And we'd look at their productivity. We'd look at where they were compared to their target, year to date, all that stuff. And we do it in a really positive, constructive way. So there are lots of reasons why people aren't on target. They might have had 2.5 week holiday or something, or they might have just come back from maternity leave, or whatever it might be. But equally, there'll be people who are absolutely, smashing it, and then you're just, sort of double checking that they're not working 24 hours a day every day, sort of thing. So with the fee earner review meetings or with the lawyer review meetings, what actually came is, all right, so there are touch points. So there's like half a dozen touch points a year with the managing partner where he's taking an interest in me and what I'm doing. And I can then reinforce some of the strategy points and say, well, obviously as a team, we want you to do this. And I think your role in it is this. And, it reinforces the sort of wider strategic.
And everybody sees their part in the plan and that strong communication and strong leadership. I suppose you're obviously a people business, being, professional services, Matthew. And I suppose, how do you get your managers day to day to, be, I suppose, engaging with their team members? Because it's great that it's coming from you, it's coming from Lewis, it's coming from the other equity partners. You're driving the strategy. That's got to be where it starts, isn't it? But there is that adage: people don't leave their job, they leave their manager, they leave their boss. So what have you done to help your managers, your team leaders, go on this engagement journey and be more engaging with their teams day in, day out?
So a couple of, we can almost go back to the Best Companies survey. So a couple of things that came out of the Best Companies survey were slightly random things. So one was about giving back. And being a lawyer, that's not something I'm overly familiar with, but it was the giving back piece, and so that led to us sort of saying to the teams, look, I'm going slightly off tangent, but I will come back. In terms of giving back, why don't we sort of formalise some of the charity stuff we do? And we're lucky enough to be supporting My Time Young Carers this year and last year, and then we'd encourage them, whether in their own teams or across the firm, to spend a day a year helping out the charity. So really tiny things. So it took all of 30 seconds at a kind of partners meeting to give that the thumbs up. It wasn't a tricky one, but it was something that had a really profound effect. So and that's an example of where we're trying to push down some of that management to our departmental heads and to our team leaders. So there's two points I would make on top of that. The first being, I'm not a micromanager, and not many of my partners are. There are one or two, but I won't name them. But I'm not micromanaging our departmental heads. They know as departmental heads, and by the way, I have a meeting with them every quarter to check that they're still online with the overriding strategy. So whilst I might meet regularly with them to see how they're getting on, I'm actually leaving the day-to-day with them. So hybrid working. So we all talk about hybrid working. Hybrid working is not an issue that I get involved in at my level. I say to the departments, you work it out, you make it work. If it doesn't work, by all means, ask me, my advice or my position on it. But equally, I'm trusting you to do it.
So you're empowering the team leaders, the managers.
I mean, there's two elements to it. Number one, I don't want to micromanage anybody ever. Right? And secondly, these are really, really good quality people. Now, what we found out, or not, what we've realised, certainly in the last year or so, is there was also a bit of a vacuum in terms of a lot of these people, quite senior people in some cases, have great responsibility because we've given them responsibility because we want them to run their departments with ownership and with with genuine control. But equally, they wanted training. So we've spent, certainly over the last 12 or 18 months, we've been providing sort of high-tier sort of leadership training, which trickles down to sort of more practical training in terms of, using motivational maps or whatever it might be. And that's given them a real boost because not only have they shared their experiences with their peers within the business, so the other managers, which is really powerful. I mean, you put people who are all heading teams up in a room and they're not all, a lot of them are not partners or equity partners, and you give them space to sort of explore some of these ideas and they come out super motivated, and that's a rolling program, I think, that we'll use and will hopefully trickle that kind of training down to some of the junior managers and all the rest of it. So some training has helped, giving them genuine responsibility. So if you look at the goals, roles, responsibilities, whatever it is that I'm plagiarising, but the responsibilities bit is you are responsible for your bit of the business and I'll support you in every way I can. And I'll try and remove all the obstacles in your way to achieving what your aims as a department are. And we will support you with the training if there's a training need there. And I would have said that we did all of those things 5 or 6 years ago, but we didn't, not in a meaningful way. And now that's front and centre. And I think you touched about professional services, and you know as much as I do about professional services, if not more. The reality is we start off being incredibly client-focused. So I would say for the first 20 years of my career, it was all about my clients. Where are we? Are they happy? What are we doing? What we've actually seen in my business over the last few years is we've become employee focused. Right? And what I mean by that is if my employees are motivated, well rewarded, we've laid out career paths for them. So any member of staff twice a year can book an appointment in my diary and have a career progression meeting with me, one-on-one, not an appraisal. I'm not looking at their figures. I'm not assessing them. I'm just saying, what is it you want to achieve? Let's work out those milestones to get you where you want to get to. And they might be at a junior, they might be newly qualified lawyers, they might be trainee solicitors, they might be salary partners who want to get into the equity, whatever it might be. And we set those goals out, and they can come in twice a year, and I just throw my diary open. So that if they've got all of those things and they know where they're going, they know as a business it's quite exciting because we're continuing to grow. They know what their position is within that business and what we expect of them. and I've given them a career path that says, well, you know, over the next 2, 3, 4 years, this is where I expect you to get to, and these are the things you need to concentrate on. They're going to be motivated. And guess what? You know, they run through brick walls, don't they? Yeah. If you're that motivated and that engaged, they'll make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. And what have you seen as the benefits? I mean, you say you started this story in 2018. We're sat here just at the start of 2024. You know, what have you seen as some of the benefits?
Happier staff.
Yeah.
Retention rates really good, really strong. I have to say, as a business, we're quite good at working out whether people aren't going to fit quite early on.
Okay.
And I think that's important too.
Yeah.
I think the honesty in terms of, look, this is what we need from you. I'm not sure that we're the best fit for you. That's okay too.
Yeah. I always, and it's in terms of recruitment and people in the business, no compromises.
Yeah.
And I think if you do start to make compromises, that's the bit where integrity goes.
It
so you're
undermines,
saying all of this, it undermines everything else you're saying,
yeah.
And that disengages people, doesn't it?
And it is difficult sometimes. You know, it's not an easy path to follow or to be completely rigorous about all the time. But I think we're good at recognising people who are going to thrive in our environment and who, you know, I think we you know, it's a hard working place, but it's fun and people react well to having some scope, having some responsibility, having some structure in terms of where we're going, and we're in an exciting phase. I mean, on a practical level, productivity rates, which is something back in 2018 we'd look at, and we looked at sort of what we were getting back on a purely sort of you know return on hours invested, you know, and it shot through the roof, and productivity. You know, if I said to you, in the number of hours that I want my lawyers to charge every day is, you know, whatever, and they were doing maybe on average in 2018 75% of that, we thought that was quite normal and we didn't think that was too bad. I mean, currently, literally, you know, up to this week, you know, our productivity levels are bang on 100%.
Wow.
During COVID, we got to sort of 111, 112%, and then it kind of dropped back to 90, 95, and currently it's back up again to 100. So what I can tell you is we've got, you know, our lawyers are working incredibly hard, and they only work hard when they're motivated and they're engaged. So on a practical level, productivity has gone up.
Yeah.
I think we've also got, and again, I hesitate to say this, but we've definitely attracted lawyers who have a similar mindset. Yeah. Now, I think variety is great, so I don't want them all to be robots.
Diversity is needed.
Yeah, diversity is required, but equally, you have to share a few common values and goals. And I think we've got a lot of people who understand what we're trying to do, realise why we're trying to do it. You know, and the truth of the matter is, you know, if I said to you, well, our strategy over the next 3, 4, 5 years is to get to £10 million, and literally that's our strategy. So there's no 2028 we need to be at £10 million. We're at 6.5 at the moment. If I said to you, you know, and our strategy could literally be one sentence long, but around that you explain to people why. Because someone said to me quite, and I thought it was a great question. Well, why do you want to grow any bigger? Yeah. And I said, and I had to stop and think. But the truth of it is because I've got these wonderful, brilliant lawyers coming through the business, and I want to make sure that they can achieve what they want to achieve. And a lot of them want to be equity partners. Well, if you want to have more equity partners, you need more turnover and more profit to share out.
So, I mean, congratulations. I mean, you've grown from 3 to 6.5 million in 5, 6 years? How much of that growth do you put down to the market conditions, and how much would you put, I mean, it's an intangible question, I know, but how much would you put down to having a more engaged team?
I would put 95% down to the employee engagement.
Wow.
I think we've been lucky enough to get some amazing people who have made amazing things happen. We've definitely invested in areas that have paid off. Yeah. We've definitely opened up new revenue streams in terms of new departments, specialised in a few things that we didn't used to do. I think we have very clear direction at the moment. I think we all know what we're trying to do, and I think most of the time understand how we think we're going to get there. I think the staff have bought into that. They're the ones running through brick walls. They're the ones bringing in new clients. They're the ones opening up, new things. And equally, if people are happy working for you and are enjoying it and are getting promoted and are getting rewarded properly, and again, all of those things I think you could have criticised us for quite a lot a few years ago. But if you are doing all of those things and you're showing genuine examples of how far people can go, then guess what? Their mates and their colleagues, peers in other firms are going to go, well, he seems to be enjoying himself, or she seems to be getting on well. I wonder what they're like. And it makes recruitment slightly easier. I wouldn't say recruitment is easy, but it makes it slightly easier. And that's been noticeable in the last couple of years.
So it sounds like on this employee engagement piece, you've done extremely well in recognising that you need that sort of visible, empowering leadership, setting a plan, communicating it, engaging the managers in helping you deliver that plan, and with the surveys and everything you're doing, giving the employees, the team members, a voice really to be heard. One of the things is about in sort of employee engagement that's often said is you've got to kind of live and breathe values. And and I haven't really heard you talk about that, where does a value set and living and breathing values fit into your sort of employee engagement story?
Good question. It's something we've talked about, and we haven't ever. I think my natural personal, not quite cynicism, skepticism, stops me from writing the values down.
Yeah.
But I think I would argue very strongly that we hold our values very dear. So,
maybe it is that you're living in, as an organisation, you live and breathe this sense of behaviour, and you're talking about people fit, and if people don't fit, then actually somehow they need to move out and move on. I suppose the values maybe just be inbred within everything you do.
It can be, but I also think as we grow, and we're 105 staff, including partners at the moment, and we think in order to get to sort of 10 million, we probably need to be 135, maybe 140 realistically. So we're talking about significant growth over the next few years. Yeah. It's only 10% growth a year if you kind of break it down, but it's, I think the value piece becomes more difficult to sort of pass on through osmosis the bigger you are. Because I'm not going to, at the moment, I can speak to everyone in our business, and I probably don't speak to all of them as much as I'd like to, but they understand the position. And I'm very accessible as the managing partner, but so are my other partners, And
I suppose that is about being aware, isn't it, that you were at that point at 2018 and 3 million, you'd kind of done as much as you could just through that kind of organic kind of piece, realised there was an issue, done something about it, that's taken you on this great journey, and congratulations on the success and the awards that you've received, but you might be soon, I suppose, at one of those pinch points where actually, how do we up our game again? And don't rest on your laurels, I suppose.
And I think I'm obviously feeling, it's January, so I'm feeling very energetic and enthused about life, but I think when we look ahead, whilst it's relatively simple to set yourselves sort of this far-reaching financial target, it's all the other stuff that comes with it. And one of the things we have talked about, which links to values, is, well, how big do you want to be? Are we going to take over the world? Well, the answer is no, because actually we want. I said to someone, I want to know everybody's name in the business, and I want to be able to stop anyone in the corridor or whatever, wherever, whichever office it might be, and have a chat with people, and they know me and I know them. I think once you get over 130, 140, 150 staff, that becomes probably very difficult. Yeah. And then you probably need to sort of set out your values perhaps in a clearer way, perhaps write them down. That would be a good start. And start doing that. I think we have a distinctive culture. I think a lot of people who work at Frettens other people recognise that you know
Absolutely.
their personality type or whatever. Interestingly, we did again. We've done some work with the partners and with some of the senior managers about what motivates them in terms of, you come to work. Why'd you come to work? Yeah. And obviously, I was expecting them all to put money, but they didn't. Not all of them. But 90% of them, their greatest motivator was they wanted to make a difference. And actually, maybe all lawyers are the same deep down.
Yeah.
They want to make a difference. But it really struck me as something about our senior guys, the senior team. I thought, so you want to come in here, and some of them want to be experts, and some of them want to be grow companies to $100 million or whatever. But actually, most people in that room wanted to make a difference by come to work and make a difference and feel that they were adding something. Yeah. And that's because we've told them that we can't do it without them, and we've shown them what we want them to do. And they've gone, do you know what, I can do that. And if they do that, then they climb up their career path.
Everybody wins, don't they?
And I couldn't be happier.
So my final question, as we kind of wrap up a discussion around employee engagement, Matthew, is in 2023, if I get this right, you, in that Best Company survey, you won some awards. You're in the top 25 law firms. You're in the top 50 in terms of companies in the Southwest. And for mid-size companies in the UK, you're also in the top 50. So in terms of engagement, you obviously are living and breathing it. I suppose my final question is, we've talked about why the survey was important. Why are those awards important to you?
I think the recognition from the survey, and again, we don't have an award shelf in our office or anything, but to be recognised for that means that something's going well. I mean, from the last results from the Best Companies, which were exceptionally good, 94% of our staff said they loved working there. Wow. Which I think, as a business owner, gives you a little warm feeling inside, doesn't it? You think, wow, that's amazing. Now, next time we do the survey, that'll probably drop. But that's great, but it keeps us on our toes. And I don't know, if we didn't do that survey or something very similar, how could we say with absolute certainty, oh yeah, we pay really well, oh yeah, they're really happy, they're really motivated, they love their manager, they love coming to work, You just don't know. It'd just be initiative for initiative's sake without any outcome, wouldn't it? And then what happens is you suddenly go, hang on a minute, we've lost a few good people, why is that? And then it's too late. And that's possibly where we were in 2018. Yeah. So I think it starts, without being too trite about it, it sort of starts with listening. It's saying, well, okay, you tell us, and then it's actually acting on that. And one of the things I say to everybody is, look, the survey isn't there just to post on LinkedIn when we get the results or anything. It's actually we've made some really big decisions around that. We spent God knows how much, 6-figure sum refurbing an office on the back of people saying, actually, our work environment's not as good as it should be. Yeah. That's real money. We're walking and talking, and I would challenge any of the staff to sort of suggest that it's not meaningful, because I promise you it is. I can show you the receipts. Brilliant. And on that note, Matthew, thank you for being so candid in sharing your experiences around employee engagement. You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. Really interesting, wasn't it, David, what Matthew had to say? It sure was. And, those real life examples of how people go about it is just, the best, isn't it? Yeah, it is. It's, books are great, aren't they? And, some of the things we're talking about are great, but actually, people that live and breathe it and do it well, we can all learn a lot from, can't we? Absolutely. So our final pillar is a one around kind of integrity. And do we do the right thing and all of those kind of things. So any personal experiences of seeing that kind of integrity pillar done well? I'll use a personal example, and I think there's jobs within any business that perhaps people don't enjoy doing, if we're honest. Every business might have one of those ones, and
I guess from my background, where one minute I may be having contractual discussions with somebody, and then actually I was actually washing wetsuits, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds stupid, but it was one of the best parts of my day. All of the staff would come back, and they would have done X, Y, and Z with all of their customers from the day, and I'd come back and I'd be dressed in my shirt and trousers, and I'd be washing wetsuits, and it was the best time of my day. I learned the most about what was going on, and it was just so fantastic for the organisation. They were the times where the people that were out there day in, day out, in the sunshine, in the rain, were like, oh look at this guy. The guy that wears the shirt is washing the wetsuits. Now I think there's a danger sometimes that you become too part of the team. And perhaps your time is best spent elsewhere. But I think that's just an example of how you can live and breathe your values, and perhaps not believe your hype too much. Is that the right way to put it?
I do think so. I think that is it, isn't it? I mean, again, I'll bang on about it forever and a day, but being in organisations where the values are on the wall and they're stuck to a wall. The plaster all over the building, but
I've never had that. I've never really believed in that. If I'm honest,
it's awful because you usually see those organisations that are very much like that. This is how we host a meeting. This is what we do. They don't live and breathe, and you can see the behaviours being completely different. I think the businesses that get that live and breathe the values right are doing the kind of things that you've just put across.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting about how clear and accepted are your values. I think that you can't make something clear and accepted by putting it in a written document. No. It sounds strange. Like, clearly there is some kind of development and understanding which comes from the narrative, but the reality is it's through actually what happens. Actually what happens day in, day out. The way we respond to each other, the way we trust each other, the way in which we behave, ethically, humanly, and so on. And I think it's so important that integrity goes along with all of the other pieces.
I think there is a piece around communicating, isn't there, and putting them into writing. But I also think, again, businesses that have been established a while should do a check-in on their values, and the best exercise I've seen for that is because usually we think about our values. We did it evolve, didn't we, when we were young as a business, and that represents who we are then. But as a business scales, certain things change. Some of the value sets change. Hopefully not significantly, but there will be a little bit of a shift. It's just the course of nature, isn't it? Yeah. And actually doing a kind of getting a selection of people from the organisation around a table and saying, what do you believe our values are? Explaining what values mean, and getting them to then come up with what they believe the values are and do a compare and contrast to what you've got written down in a document or on a wall or wherever it may be, is a really important exercise, and one, listeners, I would suggest that you consider doing.
Absolutely. And I think employee engagement certainly did seem to become more important post-pandemic or during the pandemic, as people were finding recruitment more challenging. However, it's that topic that, when you do meet on a quarterly basis, perhaps, or a monthly basis as a leadership team, is this a conversation that is being discussed? Where do we stand with that? Because the people, vital. How do we keep developing it and reviewing and reflecting upon it?
Definitely. And I think if you've got that piece and you've got those clear and accepted values, and you are starting to live and breathe them in terms of your behaviour, then I would summarise that last action as on that pillar is do what is right, not what is easy.
Sounds good, Warren. Sounds good.
Yeah. And I think, hopefully that's given listeners an insight, but I suppose we could talk about an exercise that they could do considering each of those pillars, and maybe some suggestions that we've made, and what could they do to actually start to change things and improve their own engagement within their own organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, in terms of thinking about how you could improve strategic narrative, ultimately, if your organisation has been in existence for longer, perhaps that story has been lost slightly.
Yeah.
It could have been. So it might just be about getting back to grips with, where the organisation came from, what it was trying to achieve. And then, we do. I don't think anyone particularly likes those big meetings where you stand up and, someone.
State of the nation.
Yeah. Just being honest and open about the kind of direction, if that's not clear. Speak to people in smaller groups about what the business is trying to achieve, getting their feedback. Those types of things can be ideas that certainly we would encourage and also have seen people do successfully.
Definitely. So, I think, one thing you could do, listeners, is just get, maybe 4 bits of paper and write on the top of one strategic narrative, one engaging managers, one employee voice, and the final one integrity. And then just jot down some things you could do to improve the business and the engagement through making improvements in each of those 4 areas. And hopefully we've given you some insight and some thoughts of things that you can do, and good luck with it. But there is also lots of research out there. We referred to some earlier. There is resources available online as well, isn't there?
Absolutely. Like the Chartered Institute for Personnel Development website has an awful lot of kind of ideas and also kind of research if to back this up as well, what's successful and kind of what's been proven to be more successsul. So yeah, it's a really good place to go.
And if you want to have a look at some of that research that was done in 2009, 10, 11 around employee engagement, so being really the basis of this conversation, the 4 pillars. Again, if you just Google the 4 enablers of employee engagement, there's lots of material that comes up. And we're here to help, aren't we, David?
Absolutely. We can facilitate sessions for your business, really, to bring people together and to actually start talking about these issues and how we can, make things better.
Yeah, improve engagement and do the right things. Thank you, David. It's been great to sit down and have a conversation with you around employee engagement.
Cheers, Warren.
Thank you for listening to the Evolve to Succeed podcast. My hope with every episode is that you've learned something new or heard something that challenged your way of thinking and further motivated you on your path towards becoming a more knowledgeable, informed and inspired individual and business leader. And don't forget, if you'd like to learn more about Evolve and the services we offer and how we can help you and your business confidently start, grow and exit, then please go to evolveadvisory.co.uk. Please also help and support this podcast by subscribing, liking and giving us a positive review on your favourite listening platform. Thanks for listening and see you next week.